Now, there's a special irony here about MSNBC, a channel that is directed toward, that specifically markets itself to a liberal audience, representing a paid corporate hack like former Governor Ed Rendell as a neutral analyst. And that is that in the past, they have had a strict zero tolerance policy for other forms of conflicts of interest. I'm talking about how back in 2000 and I believe it was 2010, in the 2010 elections, two MSNBC regular TV hosts, Joe Scarborough, a Republican, and Keith Olbermann, who certainly leans progressive, were both individually and separately suspended for several weeks for donating to political campaigns in their private lives. Again, and in Scarborough's case, it was as small of sums as $500 contributions. And these, again, in some cases, were politicians that they featured on their programs. Now, I understand the need to disclose that, and I think that disclosure is a very important feature here, and I would also like to see a system of campaign finance in which all of our campaigns are funded by public dollars, so there are no conflicts of interest whatsoever. But, David Shuster, I have to ask, and I know that you're a former correspondent for MSNBC, are you willing to weigh in on this? Can you tell us whether you think that this is a consistent policy here, whether MSNBC should disclose?
Yes, I will, will weigh in with my own sort of disclosure, as I always do. And I think people who don't know, I worked at MSNBC for 10 years as reporter and anchor, and I left under circumstances where I had a disagreement with Phil Griffin. So I'm putting this out there so that people can sort of know, perhaps if they want to assume that I have some sort of bias or whatnot, that's fine. But that's the whole point of disclosures. And that is, yes, it was appropriate for Keith Olbermann to disclose that he had given some money to Gabby Giffords. It was appropriate for Joe Scarborough to disclose, and the failure of those disclosures, I think MSNBC was right in saying, okay, we need to do better. We need to make sure that everybody who's on air discloses where their conflicts might be. And the fact that this has not extended to Ed Rendell for his alliance, for his possible payments from Fix the Debt, and he's allowed to go on MSNBC and make claims about Social Security and Medicare without disclosing his separate interest in this is outrageous. And MSNBC does itself no favors whatsoever by allowing this to drag on. I am simply, shocked, Daniel, that Phil Griffin and others at MSNBC wouldn't respond to you. I'm shocked that Ed Rendell on his own, who I've always previously known to be a good guy, I'm shocked that he wouldn't disclose this on his own, because you get right to the point. People can make their own judgment about whether they agree with a point of view that I have, or that Joe Scarborough or Keith Olbermann, or even that Ed Rendell. You can have a disagreement, or you can agree with Ed Rendell. But the point of broadcast journalism is that the audience should be allowed to determine whether or not your point of view that you are offering on air is somehow influenced by something that the audience may not be aware of. And that's why we have these disclosures. And I think it is simply outrageous that MSNBC has not disclosed, or now that this has been brought to their attention, that they haven't done anything about it. It's crazy.